Walking alone is pretty scary sometimes, but walking with your best four-legged friend should make things all the more safe and fun, right? Well, sometimes it doesn't matter that a dog is with you, even if it's a rather large dog, because horror still has a way of finding people and puppos to torment. Enjoy these allegedly true and scary dog walking stories, and be sure to share your scary stories with us at darkstories.org. You can follow and listen to the Darkness Prevails podcast on Spotify and iTunes too. Now, let's begin. My Dog Unburied Something, from Carter 24. I grew up in the hills and mountains of Oklahoma. All around my childhood home for miles were hunting trails and ATV trails. Ever since I was little, I'd walk them day or night, enjoying the fresh air and scenery, hoping I'd catch a glimpse of a big buck, or maybe even sight the big bear my grandpa says he'd seen. I never felt unsafe in the woods, though when I was 6 or 7, someone nearby did claim to have nearly been mauled by a mountain lion. Even if that was the case, the thought of being pursued and hunted by a predator didn't really bother me. After all, since the beginning of time, it was hunt or be hunted. Maybe I was silly, or maybe I just felt safe thanks to old Hagar, a red-bone hunting dog that was the same age as me, as my parents got him not long after I was born, hoping that we could kind of grow up together. Of course, he grew up faster than me, becoming both my friend and a protector out here in these hills. Hagar was a big dog even for a redbone. A couple years before this incident, a large stray pit bull had wandered into our neck of the woods. If I recall correctly, at the time I was running between my dad's truck and my mom's SUV, pretending that a graboid from the movie Tremors was going to get me. Being so young and focused on my imagination, I had no idea that a big pit bull had entered the yard. By the time I did realize it was there, it was only a few yards away from me, ears perked up, staring right at me. I do remember not feeling afraid. At that age, I was just thinking, whose big puppy is this? I couldn't even speak a word before the thing lunged at me and took hold of my arm. And at that very moment, old Hagar came running like a red blur, grabbing that pit bull by the neck with his teeth, tearing it up just enough to scare him away. My dad, who had been chopping logs nearby, heard the commotion, and he heard me screaming, so he ran over to me as fast as he could. All he saw was a big pit bull running away, and Hagar licking the wound on my arm. Dad knew exactly what happened. They took me to the hospital and I would be just fine, save for a scar that remains on my right arm. As you can see, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Hagar. This brings me to my experience that happened when I was 12. 12 years meant that Hagar was getting into his older dog years, but he was still spry and ready to run or walk or fight. So every time I went for a walk around the hills, he would accompany me. He took the opportunity to remark his territory, chase squirrels, and beg me to play tug-of-war with him with any sticks he found, which I happily obliged. One day in the fall that year, I went out for one of my usual walks in the late evening. This was against the wishes of my mom, who didn't like me walking so close to night at that age. But as she and my dad were out in town getting groceries, I was free to disobey. Though looking back on it, I wish I would have listened. There's a very good reason why a mother would warn you not to go out after night in the mountains and hills like these. My parents wouldn't be home for another hour since we lived so far out, so I walked down one of the old ATV trails, one of the more wide and rocky trails. You might just take a good tumble if you don't watch where you're going. There were rocks scattered about these trails of all shapes and sizes. So weirdly enough, it wasn't even a good trail for ATV riding. Nevertheless, it was one of my favorite walking trails. Of course, Hagar joined me. To him, I wasn't allowed to go alone at all if he saw me leaving the house, which I thought was funny, but sweet. By the time we made it to the old stump that I liked to rest at, which Hagar loved to chew on, the sky was shifting from orange to purple. The walk to the stump was about 20 minutes, so I knew I'd probably need to be heading back soon. But I took 5 minutes to throw sticks with Hagar, then just listen to the woods, quiet and peaceful. My skin crawled when I heard it. It was a moan or scream or both mixed together, coming from somewhere nearby in the woods. It was a sound I'd never heard out here for as long as I could remember. I sat there on the stump, both scared and confused, racking my brain to try to identify the sound. My dad, being quite the hunter himself, had set me down on multiple occasions to listen to different animal sounds you could expect in these parts. Despite this, I had no idea what I'd just heard, and I could come to no other conclusion that perhaps it was a person. And if that was the case, they sounded distressed. More fearless than I should have been, partly due to my best friend Hagar being there with me, I decided to make my way towards the moaning cry. If someone was in trouble, I could help them. I began to walk through the fallen leaves that made up the forest floor, unable to whatsoever disguise my footsteps. I wanted to be cautious, just in case I was wrong about the sound, but being stealthy was just not happening that night. I walked a ways off the trail for maybe another 10 minutes. The sound had not come back, so I was not sure where to go. I was beginning to think I had just been hearing things until it came again. It sounded much closer than before, so I was on the right track, and it certainly wasn't my imagination. And to be doubly sure about that, when I looked over at Hagar, his ears were perked up, and he was staring in the direction the sound had come from. Hagar was hearing it too, and he seemed just as concerned about it, if not more. My curiosity and lack of patience getting the better of me, I took off in a sprint towards the noise. A few moments passed when Hagar suddenly just blew right past me. He stormed ahead about 20 yards and stopped, staring right at the ground. As I ran to catch up to him, he began to sniff and dig at the dirt below him. "What you got, boy?" I hollered to him. Hagar was unfazed. He was so focused on digging that he nearly seemed to have forgotten about me. A second or two later, I made it up to him to see what he was digging at. I caught my breath, staring at the ever-widening hole. Clump by clump, it was slowly revealed, and every second that passed, I was more and more in disbelief and shock. The first thing that was revealed was a mouth, lips that were thirsty and dry, shriveled like two parallel raisins. Then above it, a nose. Well, no nose, but a lack of one. When Hagar kept digging and uncovered two eyes, I nearly screamed. But what I did do for sure was fall backward onto my rear. Because when he uncovered that human face all the way to the eyes glanced towards me. Hagar had uncovered a half-rotted body mere inches under the earth, and somehow its eyes had turned to look at me. As I stared at it from my position on the ground, trembling, I would soon learn that the eyes weren't the only things that worked. It spoke with a dire hoarseness to its voice, and I swear it said the words, "not dead," which was bizarre coming from that thing, because dead is exactly what it looked like. Dead was exactly what it should have been. But at the time, my mind was reeling in fear and disbelief. I could do nothing more than look unblinkingly at this thing in the ground and struggle to find explanations for it. When those eyes tried to blink but could not find eyelids to do so, I finally found the sense and strength in me to lift myself up and run away. And yet, after I ran for a few moments, I heard whimpering. I turned back to expect the worst, but all I saw was Hagar, sitting calmly by the unearthed face. He stared back at me, whimpering, as if requesting something that I didn't understand. "Hagar, come on, boy, come on." I desperately called out to him. I didn't want him near that undead thing. I could still hear it breathing, even with the distance between us now. However, Hagar would not budge. I took a step forward and called again. "Hagar, come on. We need to go home, boy. Come on, Hagar." Again, Hagar didn't listen. His only reply then was to lie down and rest his head on his front two paws. Why on earth was he so relaxed in a situation so disturbing? Fear overpowered me. "Okay, Hagar, I'll be right back, boy. I'll be right back. I'll go get Mom and Dad." Telling him it was going to be okay, I think that was meant more for me, because Hagar wasn't scared. But I did as I told him. I ran faster than I ever had before, hoping that Mom and Dad would already be home. What had been a 20-minute walk, I must have ran back in 7 or 8 minutes. If those numbers are weird, I'm sorry, but I can't be sure. I was so panicked. Everything seemed to be a blur to me. And luckily, as I crested the hill where our home was, Mom and Dad were just pulling up. I ran over and slapped the driver's side window, nearly giving my dad a heart attack. He rolled down the window and asked what in the world was wrong with me, and I told him everything. Quickly, he ran in the house grabbing his shotgun, and I showed him where we had discovered the face. I'll be honest with you. Considering just how beyond normal this whole situation had been, I didn't expect one bit to make it back there and see the face. I figured it would just be a hole in the ground. Not to mention, I was paranoid, worried that Hagar might not be there when we get back. Or worse. Tirelessly we ran until we made it to the spot, and there Hagar was, still lying there, calmly. He even whimpered a bit when he saw us approach. I ran over to pet him, so happy that he was okay. "Good boy, Hagar, good boy."
Please.
Chills flooded down my spine as I slightly looked over, and that face was still in the ground. My dad stopped behind me, and I could hear him under his breath curse a word that I was not allowed to say. My father demanded I run back home to my mother and to tell her to call an ambulance. Scared, I did what he told me to, but this time Hagar went with me. After another short run, I made it back home, and I told my mom what my father had said. It took 90 minutes for the ambulance to show up way out here. My dad, not sure what to do, was too afraid to touch the man in the ground, fearing he might make things worse for the man. Because, as we would later find out, what Hagar had uncovered in that dirt, it wasn't some ghoul or zombie or spirit like my childhood mind thought it was. It was a hunter, close to death. He had been mauled by a bear and buried. I didn't even know bears would bury a person like that. But that man survived being attacked and buried, long enough to make it to the hospital and to give up the ghost there. I felt so bad. Because instead of trying to help the man, I had been scared of him. I'm in my 50s now, but that incident had always left a deep scar on me. Growing up, I couldn't stop thinking about that man's last moments. Partially eaten, half buried, left to nature and the elements to rot still alive, only to die in a hospital, before your family could even make it there. One of the last things he saw was a terrified little boy and a brave red coon hunting dog. Late Night Dog Walk, from Anonymous. I was walking my dog on a warm summer night in July. I live in California, so July is one of the warmer months. I'd left the house and was walking to the park. When I arrived, I saw a figure sitting on a park bench. By then, it was around 10 p.m., so it wasn't normal for someone to be out this late, especially on a weeknight. But I figured that he or she had just come to the park to smoke without being caught. Or maybe they were just a night person. Regardless, I continued walking my dog. I'd gotten pretty far in front of my dog, so I looked back and stopped to let him catch up. But when I turned, I realized the figure was gone. Thinking nothing of it, I continued walking my dog. I rounded a corner. There's a large field in the middle of my park, and it was dark, but still illuminated by streetlights. I was aimlessly looking around, enjoying the music I was listening to. For some reason, I looked at the field, and there I saw something. There was a black object sitting in the middle of the field. I thought it must have been a baseball bag that had been left at the park by a baseball player. This sounds exceedingly stupid, but I decided to investigate the object. I'd gotten about 10 feet from the object when I realized it wasn't a bag at all. It was a figure. The same figure that I'd seen earlier at the park bench. I could make out at this point that the figure was a man. He was crouched down, facing me. He was a medium-sized Asian man, and he was wearing all black and a sweater. Given that it was July and 95 degrees at night, his attire struck me as a bit odd. He was crouched down, facing me. I stopped, and I decided to turn around. But before I did, the man darted at me, reaching me in under 2 seconds. Startled, I jumped back, immediately asking the man, "What the heck are you doing?" His answer sent chills down my spine. He replied, "I was waiting for you to come here." Already frightened enough, I decided to leave and continue walking my dog, not taking my eyes off the man for the first 100 feet as I walked. He never took his eyes off of me either. When I felt as though the distance between him and I was sufficient, about 100 feet, I decided to focus on walking and getting the heck out of there. I had taken my eyes off of the man for no more than 10 seconds. When I looked back, he was maybe 10 feet away from me. What scares me about this experience is that I never witnessed him moving when he was following me. By then, I was scared enough to run the heck away from there. I ran, and as I did, I noticed he was still following me. I dropped my dog, punched the man in the nose, and picked up my dog again. Then I ran all the way back to my home. I don't walk my dog late at night anymore. No one messes with our German Shepherd. From Silverwolf 42. This happened to my mom in Bucharest, Romania, in the late 1980s one summer night. We had a female German Shepherd, born of parents from Germany, named A. Her mother's mother was a wolf from the forest, completely gray with gold eyes. A came out looking like her father, Eros, mostly black with some beige here and there. She had medium-long, wavy hair, and her size was within European standards for her breed. Her father had won countless beauty and agility shows all over Europe. A was a gentle dog, but you wouldn't know that by looking at her. There was something on her face that scared the crap out of most people upon seeing her. It must have been the wolf in her. German Shepherds tend to protect their owners to the death, without any special training. We did, however, take A to some obedience classes a few times, but it was more for us, to learn how to deal with a dog, since she was our first. We did no attack training or protection training with her. At the time of the story, A was 3 or 4 years old, and close to midnight, she requested to go out to do her business. We lived in an apartment building, so my mom got dressed to take out A. During that time, there was still communism in Romania, and except for some areas where everyone knew not to go after dark because of gypsy gangs, it was relatively safe to be outside at night. My dad offered to join my mom, but my mom refused the offer. My mom has 10 years of ballet and 8 of karate under her belt. She wasn't worried about going out late, especially with a German Shepherd in tow. While outside, my mom unleashed A so she could roam freely to find a place to take care of business. They walked down the boulevard, and after a while, A found a good spot to pee. Business taken care of, my mom called A to go home. Mom started the walk back, knowing that A would follow her. Less than a minute later, my mom heard human footsteps following her. She did not panic. She kept her pace steady, as to not alert the person following her that she knew she was being pursued. As she walked, my mom was wondering where A was when she needed her, gently moving her eyes left and right searching for A. The person following my mom was getting closer, so my mother got ready to turn around and kick the living daylights out of the man that was following her. Just then, she heard the man yelp and tumble on the ground behind her. Surprised, my mom turned around swiftly to see what happened, to find the man lying on the ground on his belly. A was on his back, with her teeth in the back of his neck. The man began to scream at my mom to get the dog off of him. My mom ignored the man and started to talk to A.
"You scared me there. Where were you?"
She then realized that A, sensing the man, chose to hide and wait for the right moment to attack. A followed my mom and the man so quietly that neither of them ever heard her. Then, just when the man least expected it, when he was most likely focused on grabbing my mom, A jumped on his back, bit his neck, and toppled him to the ground. Funny enough, A never drew blood from the man. She just gripped him hard enough to immobilize him. Relieved, my mom laughed at A, telling her, "Let's go home," and to the man, "Don't you dare come after me again." A let go of the man, who ran like the devil was on his heels, and my mom and A got back home safely. Scary dog walking. From Elizabeth W. So this story makes me sound crazy, but one day I was walking my dog up in this small forested area where you can go for walks. I was just walking as usual when my dog Rudy shot his head up. This quickly spooked me, as I am a 5'1" female. I look around, seeing what spooked Rudy, when I see 2 people walking. I recognize the boy as we live in a small town. But there was another man walking with him, a man I didn't know, so I figured he was his father. Rudy goes back to sniffing and the 2 of them walk past us. As they do, I say a polite, "Hello," and the boy says hi. The man, that I'm assuming is his dad, smiles. After a moment, they're about 20 meters away from us when Rudy stops sniffing. At that point, I turn to look back at the 2 of them. They're making a turn up ahead. When the boy and his dad pass this thick tree, the dad doesn't come out. I was confused by this, but didn't think anything of it. This trail is a big oval, so I just went in the other direction knowing I would pass them. When I finally see the boy again, his dad wasn't there. I was really confused as to the fact that the man had no other path to take, and it wasn't really the type of area that you would go off trail, since it's all just dead bush. I passed the boy once more, thinking that maybe that wasn't his dad, and the guy was just a slow walker. But I still should have seen him again. The whole rest of the walk I was scared that some man would just appear and come after me. We finished the trail and I never saw that man again, and I also saw the boy take off in his car, alone. Is there some creepy person living in the woods? Or was that boy walking with a man that wasn't actually alive when I saw him? What I heard while walking my dog. From Black Wolf 96237. I'm a 23-year-old female. This story happened last year when I took my dog for a walk. I have 2 dogs, one that is 15 and the other is 8. Before this happened, I had moved to Ohio where my dad is having a housemaid. He works for Boeing, and the one in South Carolina where I used to live ran out of positions for him to work. So it was either get a new job or move to Ohio. So here we are. Anyway, I was the first to move up here, as my sister had to finish high school, and my stepmom, of course, stayed back with her, because she was 18 at the time, and my stepmom wanted to spend more time with her own kids and grandkids. I missed my friends that I had to leave to move here. It was very sad for me. Anyway, it took an 11-hour drive, but when we got there after the house was finally done being built and so on, it was a really nice place, bigger than our old house. I got to pick my room and moved in, and I settled in just fine. After that, my dad had to leave for some days at a time, so it was basically just me with my 2 dogs and 3 cats. I know it sounds like a zoo at my house, but it's nice and relaxing in a way for me. After all, I'm more of an animal person than a people person. I'd have to spend some nights in the living room because my oldest dog had bad arthritis in his hips, but he's still going strong. I would wake up early to walk the dogs, but it can be difficult to do so. As such, I walked them one at a time, which is a ton better. I would walk them 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and nighttime. Nighttime when I walked them would be pitch black, minus some streetlights, and yet I never felt uneasy walking them that late. But all that changed. It was late at night, around 11 p.m. My dad was out on work getting supplies for the company. So I was camping out in the living room and got up, getting the leashes to walk the dogs. I took the oldest one out first and walked him around the neighborhood. Everything was fine when I walked him. I got him, let him inside, and then got the little one on his leash for a walk. Call me paranoid or whatever, but every time I walked my dogs one at a time, I always locked my door. I was walking the smallest dog until he did his business. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a woman. Her voice sounded far away, but I clearly heard her, and what she had said made me stop.
No, please, don't.
I was confused. I looked down the street where I heard it, but I didn't see anyone. The road was pitch black out. I felt my chest tighten, thinking about what that was. I quickly got back home, letting me and my dog inside and locking the door behind us. As I sat on the couch, I was aghast. My mind was racing. What if someone was hurt? What if there was something going on? I didn't see anyone outside, but I clearly heard a woman, and she sounded terrified. It could have been my mind playing tricks on me, but I heard a woman, an actual person. I didn't know what to do, so I called my grandma and I told her what happened. She sounded uneasy and suggested that I call the police. I wanted to, but I didn't see what house it was at, and I didn't know if it was a family arguing and nothing serious had actually happened. So I didn't call the police. Later on, I didn't see anything about it on the news. To this day, I wonder what truly would have happened if I followed that scream. It's been about a year now, and we had a huge backyard made with a fence, so we didn't have to take walks. But still, I would never take my dogs for a nighttime walk after that night, and I still don't know what I heard.